Those people who think that we should totally leave Labour Party, I disagree with.
You never questioned your affiliations with the Labour Party?
No, I don't. If you have a disagreement in the family, do you leave the family? How is it in the interest of the Muslim community, even of all the reservations they may have of Labour Party, not to have me as a voice in the party?
Welcome to another episode of Real Talk. With the UK general election underway, we're here in Manchester, just outside the British Muslim Heritage Centre, to speak to Afzal Khan, the Labour candidate from Manchester Rusholme. Now, Afzal is one of the Labour Party's most high-profile Muslims. He was first elected as an MP in 2017 and later re-elected in 2019. In November, he and a number of other Labour MPs made headlines when he stepped down from the shadow cabinet to vote for a Gaza ceasefire in Parliament, defying the Labour leadership and Keir Starmer. Now, this interview comes at a time when there's a lot of anger from British Muslims and others directed towards the Labour Party over its stance on Gaza. Now, with all that in mind, let's begin the conversation. Afzal Khan, thank you so much for coming on Real Talk.
Great to be here with you.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. Thank you so much. I want to take you back to last November when you decided to step down from the shadow cabinet to back for a call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Why'd you do that?
I think when you go back to 7th of October, as most people talk about, that clearly was a shock. And nobody expected that. And the violence that was used, the hostages that were taken. And then myself, knowing the history of this part of the world, someone who's been engaged with the Palestine struggle, I knew that the response the Israeli government is going to make is going to be equally huge now, because this has sort of sent a shockwave to them, and they're going to make sure their whole deterrence idea rests on this, hit back harder. Mm-hmm. So from that day, I was worried what's going to happen. And then as things unraveled, you realized that the damage being done was disproportionate. When we got to November, I've had a number of meetings with our leader, Keir Starmer, and other senior people in the party. I had concerns with the direction we had taken, and I expressed that. And at that point, it was the first opportunity for us to vote for a ceasefire. So I knew what had happened was terrible. What Israeli has done was terrible, and it's only going to get worse. So the sooner we can get the ceasefire, the better it's going to be for hostages, better it will be for the Palestinians, and the better it will be for the cause of justice and peace. Because wherever you may sit in this dispute, one thing is clear: the answer lies in resolving this issue, both sides having a peaceful life, because as humans, irrespective of who we are, where we come from, what faith creed we may have, we all have the same need. Mm-hmm. And that is, trying to have a good life, a peaceful life, a prosperous life. And that's the answer. So I think we all understand it. It's just getting there. And I thought war, if you can use that term, because to be honest, I feel uncomfortable, because there is no army on the other side. It's a one-sided, it's one of the strongest war machine that exists. Certainly in the Middle East, for them to go after them like this, when it's such a densely populated area, I felt that there's going to be a bloodbath here. And so I couldn't carry on when the party's position was not to support for a ceasefire, but for a pause. To me, pause is not an answer. Ceasefire is the answer here, and then getting on to resolving it is the answer. That's why I sort of then I couldn't carry on, and that's why I resigned.
But the idea of defying the party at the time, do you not feel like that would affect your position within the party?
It did.
It did.
Fundamentally, my history is as a loyal member of the Labour Party. So rebellion isn't part of my nature. It's not something I would have done lightly. And I did think long and hard. I thought of the consequences as well, that in a way I had a long journey to being where I was as a shadow minister. and knowing that elections will be around the corner, and that means I will be a minister.
Yeah.
Throwing that away is something big. But I just couldn't carry on because I thought, as the faith teaches us, saving of a single life is as though you are saving humanity. So that was what was the key. So I thought, on a principal point, whatever the cost may be to me individually, it was the right thing to do. And now, having resigned and having sort of a number of months have passed on, I have no regrets.
No regrets?
No regrets, no, actually. Even, if I don't become a minister, I still have no regrets. I think I did the right thing. I also think it was the right thing because ultimately, a number of us resigned. So I'm not the only one who resigned.
Sure.
There are others who resigned. I think there are 56 Labour MPs and shadow ministers, 8 of them who resigned altogether, voted against the party and the leadership.
It was called a rebellion, basically.
Well, media gives its own name to it, but nevertheless, it was probably the biggest Keir Starmer, the leader, has seen. Mm-hmm. So it had a knock-on effect on the leadership as well, because I think there are many more in the Labour Party, both in the shadow ministers and backbench MPs, and tens of thousands members who are also feeling uncomfortable with where the party was. And this is why you see hundreds of councillors also resigned. But I think that then had a knock-on effect on the leadership to think. And that internal work, which then carried on to open up that discussion, to see how we can get to a position which is more acceptable across the board in the party, is what opened up. So whilst on an individual level there is a sacrifice, but there is a gain, and that gain is the party as a whole then moved to a much better, at a healthier position where we are today. Because today I feel in one level vindicated with my position. Secondly, I feel comfortable that the party has now got to a position which is acceptable even to me. So that happened. If that had not taken place, of that the number of people sort of saying, hey, this is not acceptable, then maybe party may have not got here. So that has been the gain side of it. And now the position of the Labour Party is straightforward. We want immediate ceasefire. We want more aid to be going in to help those poor people who've been having so much suffering, so much loss of life, so much of the civilian infrastructure, schools, mosques, churches, all of them being destroyed. They need that help, to go back to some sort of normality. Hostages to be released. Again, you can see the both sides got lots of people who are actually missing out from their loved ones. They need to be back there. And then this accountability I feel very comfortable with, because I think in the past you can see the cycle of violence that has been taking place every 4 or 5 years. Something happens like this, a lot of loss of human life, and yet there never been any accountability. So the Labour Party's position to reinforce this, that the ICC, the ICJ, their judgments, that they have to be respected and implemented, I welcome that. I think that's a healthy position. And ultimately the resolving of this whole issue and the need for other countries to be engaged into this so that together we deliver this peace which so urgently, badly is needed in that part of the world, again, I think is a good place for the Labour Party. And this opens up the contrast, because one of the things which I was also upset about was being part of the Labour Party, being part of the Progressive Party. How have we managed to get into bed with the Tory party and also one of the most right-wing extremist Israeli government? So it just didn't sit well with me. So I think the clear voters have been now separated between the Tory party and the Labour Party. I'm shocked that now, 8-9 months down the road, the Tory party is still standing on this idea of pause. When you've got a good 36,000, 37,000 Innocent people have been lost. They have lost their lives. Probably 15, 20,000 are missing. And then you've got another close to 100,000, have been injured, and the devastation I've already talked about. So how, can you not understand this whole thing is totally disproportionate and does not provide any answer to the solution? Quite the opposite. Those people who are losing their loved ones, they'll be raged, the anger, and hence you're opened up to the further cycle of violence. And I don't think that is in anybody's interest.
I'm going to get into this a bit more in a second, but I know that you weren't the only one who resigned or stepped down. But you are one of the most high-profile Muslim members of the Labour Party. You're quite well known. You were the parliamentary chair of the Labour Muslim Network as well.
Yeah.
So for you to take a decision to resign, what do you think that says about Muslims within the party?
I think what it says, first of all, is that, look, you should have politicians who stand for principles. So I think that sends a very powerful message. I've had many non-Muslims here in Manchester who say to me that I have given them hope. So me resigning has given them hope, and therefore they're still staying with the Labour Party. And the second point, I think, ultimately is that whilst we have a broad tent in the Labour Party, there has to be a mechanism through which you can express. And then there will be occasions when that goes to the extreme level of resignation. But what I would say to you is, the analogy, they say that you can open the door easily from inside rather than breaking it from outside. So being inside, that gives you that opportunity to make that change, what you strongly feel is better than being outside. So those people who think that we should totally leave Labour Party, I disagree with. And I think the analogy I used of opening the door from inside is a better answer. And I also think we have so many other needs as well as a community who live here. The third point I would make is, whilst we have many parties in the country, but if you look at the past 100 years, what you will find is that the two main parties is where the swing is of the power. I also find uncomfortable that with the current 14 years of Tory government, their relationship with the Muslim community has been appalling. They have had very little dealing with the Muslim community. When they cannot even speak to one of the main Muslim organizations, which is Muslim Council of Britain, a large umbrella organization, which would have different shades in there. What hope is there with anybody else? And then for us to burn our bridges also with the Labour Party, I think from the community's perspective, you've already had 14, 15 years in the cold. Is it in the community's interest to spend next 14, 15 years in the cold again? No, because we have needs. And final point I would make on this, because I think it's important, because there's so many people out there who have this raw emotions, and they think the answer is forget the two parties, we will just go around playing. And that point ultimately is, these small parties, maybe extreme example, but the example is 0 plus 0 equals 0. So if they themselves are so small, and we are small, there is no power, there's no influence. So what effect are you going to have? 0. So what's the point joining them? It's much better with the argument that I'm developing, which is being inside the tent.
You're saying there's no meaningful change that can happen if you leave the two-party system?
Yeah, because the system, the way it is based on the two parties. You look at it in the last 100 years, that's what you will see. So anywhere else you go, what does it mean? Nothing.
So I take it you never, throughout the past 7 or 8 months, you never questioned your affiliations with the Labour Party?
No, I don't. And the reason I would give you another analogy, if you have a disagreement in the family, Do you leave the family? No, you sort the disagreement out. Labour is also a family. It's a family with which we've had a long affiliation. Generation after generation, we have been part of it. So the answer lies sorting this difference out. And my argument is, by being inside, by being stronger, then we have a better chance of sorting that out than being outside the tent.
Okay.
That's the sort of logic of the argument. And the second logic of this argument is, even if we accept that this one issue of Gaza is be-all, yeah, it's so important.
But according to the polls, it is quite important.
Yeah, I'm not trying to undermine it at all. But my argument is, even if we accept that argument, that this is the single main thing which will turn things, yeah, fine. But then the difficulty we face as a Muslim community is the biggest sport, the biggest bloc that you have is also in the Labour Party. And then the logical argument develops again that if you've got the biggest group here, how is it wise to make that weaker? Isn't it wise to make that even more stronger? And that again takes you to the same point, that actually we need to redouble our engagement, not pull back.
So are you satisfied with the Labour stance on Gaza right now?
More or less, yes. I think from what you can expect from a party which is, in our case, in the UK, you know, their positioning is okay. I mean, personal level, I could have say I like this bit more, this more harsh. Let's put the arms embargo in there as well, and really tighten the screw on Israel. Yeah, you can all that. Yeah, but I think in the complexity of the diplomatic level of the countries and how they operate, the fundamental pillars are in there now with the Labour Party.
The party's leadership is basically accused of being complicit in Israel's war on Gaza. I'm sure you've seen this. I'm sure.
Yes, I've seen it. Yeah.
It starts with when Keir Starmer said that Israel had a right to cut off, aid and or water and food to Gaza. The refusal of the Labour Party to call for an arms embargo, like you just mentioned, refusal to call for sanctions on Israel, refusal to participate in real diplomatic pressure on Israel. The accusation here is that as the official opposition, they're making it quite easy for the Tories because there's no real meaningful pressure on the Conservative government. Yeah. So when you have the government, not having real pressure to impose any kind of pressure on Israel, and then you have the opposition more or less doing the same, what do you have?
So I think my criticism of the Muslim community on this point would be the other way around. And that would be this, that look, we feel it. So there's no ifs and buts about it. So we all feel it. So we must accept this. Don't think that there are some who feel more. Actually, I think every Muslim I've met, they feel it very strongly with what is happening. Then the issue is, well, we've got to remain just, because that is the golden principle of Islam. Even if it's against your loved ones, your kins, you must remain just. And this is the issue then. Because we know that whatever is happening is the Israeli government which is doing it. So they are number one. And then if you want to say, well, okay, who's aiding and abetting them? And then you'll have to throw in America and say that overwhelmingly 90% of everything which is going there is going from America. So you could give America number 3. And let's be generous and say Britain is Great Britain. And yes, we've got a huge role, although the percentage is less than 1%. And let's put Britain 3. Yeah? But then you have to go after the government first. As a community who live in Britain, you have to go after the government, because the levers of the powers, both in the country and diplomatically in the UN, other international institutions, lay with the government. And what I find troubling is that our community is lined up simply against Labour Party and not taking into account that actually is the Conservative Party which is in power. Yeah? We should hold their feet at least also to the fire. And that I do not see when I go around, when I meet people. And this is why I think we've got to be careful, because end of the day, at the height of this argument, Labour remains an opposition. And any opposition anywhere in the world, the only thing they can do is talk. Then now let's talk to the point that you are saying, that okay, Labour may not even be talking, and that is objectionable. Then I would say to you is that actually, number one is that they have to be at least responsible as a party. Yeah? What are the things that they can achieve? And work that out. And then you go into the next layer level. You know, when let's take the genocide word. You know, it's a specific word. It has a specific connotation legally. You know, how that happens. That mechanism we are going through. So you got to take that into account. And then saying somehow, person like myself who spoke on this subject 33 times. I spoke with the Prime Minister's challenging him 4 times. I've done about 30 plus questions, written questions on this subject as well. People out there accusing me of committing genocide. How is that fair?
I think it's more directed towards the leadership. I don't think it's directed at you.
I'm telling you, it's been directed at me.
But I think the accusation comes from a place because you belong to the party which they believe is doing this.
When you analyze it and then say, well, if you are a responsible individual, then you understand the justice requirements of that definition. A layman can use it loosely. But anyone with a position, responsibility, with understanding will not use it loosely. They will understand the connotations in the legal sense, that it has to go through a due process of justice. And there are courts who then define it, and at the moment they're investigating it. You can't give a judgment on it when the things are being investigated. So that's, I think, is fair. Then you come to the question of saying, well, because of the risk element, and therefore we should protect ourselves, and as an opposition, we should be calling for arms embargo or holding of the arms till this is clarified. Now that starts making more sense. But then you also realize that the Labour's position is actually much closer to what we are asking for, because what they are saying is we want to see the legal judgments, advice the ministers have received, because their job is to make sure the law is being followed. And the ministers then are refusing to release that. That also hinge on this point, that if that advice is saying that there is a very real risk of this happening, then Labour can logically move to the next level and say, hey, we need this. But the government's failure to release that advice is the issue. It's not that Labour isn't asking, they are asking. Yeah? So I think knowing that terrible things are happening is one thing, genocide is something else. And I think that has to be gone through the process. And I agree personally that you can't just sit here and say, well, we'll wait till the judgment in the court comes. Yeah? When such a scale of violence is taking place, then I think all those who are responsible countries, they need to play their part. All those countries. And that also includes all the Muslim countries. They have a part to play in here as well. So then again, just targeting opposition party is where I just feel we need to get that balance right. And I don't think we have quite got it.
But I think even in response to that, I think the reason why members of the Muslim community and others outside of it are pointing towards the Labour, well, first of all, because they know Labour is the incoming government based on every poll. Yes. Everyone knows that Labour is expected to be the next government. So I think they're coming at it from that perspective. Okay. It's also been the traditional voting place for Muslims in the UK. So they're coming at it from that perspective. And because Labour has always prided itself for being the party of human rights.
And international law.
Sure, and international law. And it's headed by an international human rights lawyer as well. Yeah, exactly.
To top it all up.
To top it all up. I think also because of the historical aspect of the conservatives, history with always standing with Israel. I think people are looking at Labour differently. It's not just a matter of them being in opposition and picking and choosing. I think it's because they know that Labour will be in power quite soon.
I get it, and I take all that into account when I make this statement in saying, listen, we're not the same place as the Tory party. There's a miles apart we are, number one. Secondly, when this question is being put to Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, saying, look, hey, you're about to be into power, and if you are Prime Minister, what will you do? And he made it clear. He would say, stop to the Israeli government. So that again tells you the difference between the Tory government and a possible Labour government. And then again, the 5 things I've said as being their position of immediate ceasefire, of aiding the need of help, etc., the international law as well, and sorting this problem out as well. So they all then line up, which then I think is acceptable. And I think as a community, we must accept this point that actually there is a difference between the position of the Labour Party and the position of the Conservative Party. And I also think it's as unfair, many elements in our community who have almost gone into time freeze, that they just want to make a judgment of the Labour Party, how they responded to this issue on 7th of October. And you mentioned the leaders' comments at LBC radio. Again, we fail to understand that this was corrected, that this was not accepted, this is what he was saying.
He denied saying it, but it's very clear in the video clip.
I get it. I've seen it. I've seen it many times. And many times this point has been brought to me. But I think if you look at Keir's position before, after, it makes clear that they follow this idea that the international law must be obeyed. And according to international law, that behavior is not allowed. So therefore, I would say that either he misunderstood the question or he rolled into something when he was trying to answer something else. And these are different arguments which are being given, what happened.
But his position was also defended by senior members of the party.
But he was corrected. The only thing you can argue, I think, fairly on this point is why it took them 8 days. This should have been corrected straight away. It's clear cut. It's against the international law. Why did they sit back? I think that's the only legitimate argument against it. The second argument I would say is, once this has been clarified, as soon as we can also see the current position of the Labour Party is quite clear, and they are pushing for this following of the international law, ICC, ICJ, which are also asking these sort of things, then to keep on holding Labour Party accountable for that one particular time is unjust.
But I don't think it's just that. It's accumulation of things. It's the idea of them not calling Israel's acts war crimes, for example. The issue here is that the bar is very low, even when you compare it to the Conservative Party. And I think that's people issues. But let me ask you this: do you think that the UK should continue arming Israel under a Labour
I've already asked for it.
Yeah, in May you have.
In my opinion, I've asked for that we should impose armed sanction.
What do you think Britain's relationship with Israel should look like in the future?
Well, look, we should have a relationship with Israel. I don't think that we should say we don't have it.
Sure, but what should it look like? Should it be similar to what it is now?
Well, it's very simple. I think the relationship Britain should have with any country should be fundamentally be in line with international law. It should be in line with fairness ideas as well, and sort of mutual benefit idea.
If we move on to British Muslim votes and the election. First of all, what are your thoughts on groups like the Muslim Vote? They came out and they're trying to mobilize Muslim voters in the country. They actually endorsed you, as I'm sure you know, and then
withdrew as well.
Then they withdrew their endorsement. What are your thoughts on that?
I think at one level, I am quite happy with the Muslim community being more and more organized. I think that is the right of the Muslim community. Any community being organized is a good thing. It's not a bad thing for a society. I think the way they're going about this, I have severe reservations about what they're doing.
The Muslim community or the group?
The group.
The group.
The group. I think they're fundamentally missing the key aspect of politics, how things tick. And I think that also comes from fundamentally none of them have ever held any political position. I know many of them who are engaged with this. And that lack of knowledge is opening them up to this raw rage and upset, the pain which the Muslim community have. And then to this position that we will not deal with two major parties, I think is a fundamental mistake. I think much better way would have been for them to look at individual MPs, look at their performance, look at their past, and look at their commitment for the future, and then come to a judgment. has a community's interest, has a Muslim community, what are those 5, 10 things which are important to us, and do it sort of systematically, in an organized way and a fair way, cross the political parties, and then make a judgment, say, right, this individual in Manchester Rusholme, in overall, may not be a perfect angel, but it scores better than the next 7. And I think as a community, on balance, we are happy to support that. And then the other constituency look at it again, what's an offer? That, I think, is more healthy than this blanket sort of ban idea. And you can see the absurdity of this idea straight away when they cannot even endorse me.
Why do you think they withdrew that endorsement?
I think there was a backlash. I think there are an element in the Muslim community who were almost holding the interest of the Muslim community hostage. I feel so strongly about this because the interest of the Muslim community does not allow for us to not endorse a person like me, because any criteria they set, if they set that, I will pass of the need of the Muslim community. And I have a track record of that. And on top of that, I come from the heart of the Muslim community with half a dozen main organizations with which I've served at the senior positions. So how do they get to this place where they cannot even endorse someone like me? Even on this issue of Gaza, there's hardly a single MP who's spoken more than me on this subject. And there's hardly any MP who has spoken in the longer period. You know, I go back 40 plus years. So what is the criteria they're using?
Do you not see it as a reflection of the anger in the wider community? You think it's just one element?
Well, this is exactly the point. You cannot be in a position of leadership and make your judgments based on anger. They have to be based on wisdom and thought through, long-term implication included. How is it in the interest of the Muslim community, even of all the reservations they may have of Labour Party, not to have me as a voice in the party? You cannot justify it. And that's their mistake. And that's what they're doing wrong. And that's through lack of either experience, or there is a motive which is going on here, which we need to understand as a community. How do we allow these individuals set up this organization and take the community in a direction which is harmful? You know, we've been out in the cold 15 years under the Tory government. Is it in the Muslim community's interest to be out in the next 15 years? That's a whole generation you were lost. How can you do this? And that's what they're doing.
What do you think of the Muslim candidates and others who are running as independents in an effort to punish Labour?
I think, again, 2 things. At the heart of it, if you look at it, you know, there's be hardly any who will come through. And as I say this with experience of 25 years of running these elections, I know how the machine works and what happens. So I would be surprised if even we had 4. They talk about 100. Nonsense. I would be surprised if 4 independents won. I would be surprised. And the second point is, let's give them the benefit of the doubt that they do get these 4 individuals through. What are they going to do when you've got 630, 40 MPs sitting there, when the whole system is geared into a party ideas? What are they going to achieve? How will they deliver anything?
Isn't it about sending a message to the Labour Party?
I think we've done that. I think with the local election which has taken place, this should be a good one for us, both sides, to reflect. Labour Party clearly has. They straight away came out and they said, well, they'll go after every single vote. Shouldn't the Muslim community also look at it and say, right, we've sent this message, let's look at our interests now, and let's make sure we have a voice in the coming government, and make sure we preserve this relationship for the betterment of our own future, of our children in this country, and for justice and fairness internationally and in the world.
The local elections, like you mentioned, they've showed, you know, a slump in the support of Muslim voters towards the Labour Party. I think the Rochdale by-election also proved that. Now, what do you think the Labour needs to do to regain the trust of Muslim voters?
I mean, one of the things I said after the local elections to our leader here is that whilst we have had a good result in the local elections as a party nationally, It's clear that there are pockets where there is a concern, and many of these areas include Muslims. And it's not exclusive Muslims, there are others as well who are upset, I think. So the party needs to have a proper understanding of this. So they need to do their own sort of research inquiry into what happened here. And then they need to come up with a package, the idea that what are those issues and concerns, and how can we deliver better on this to satisfy this. And I've already said to you that this relationship between the Muslim community and the Labour Party is a mutual benefit. It's a win-win for both. And if there's a loss in this, it's a loss for both. And therefore, both sides should sit back, think carefully, and work out how we can move forward. And therefore, as a party, Labour, as a big party with a lot of experience, with the about to be in government, they need to then look at it and see how they can reach out. And I think efforts are being made. I'm convinced of that idea, and I'm one of those who's making that effort to build those bridges, because that is what's good for the Labour Party, and that's what's good for the Muslim community.
I've seen some tweets that say that only if you resign and stand as an independent that you should get Muslim votes.
Well, I don't agree with it, number one. Secondly, I think to make this single issue of this such a magnitude that you make such a drastic sort of change, again, I don't agree with it. I think a healthy thing to do would be is to understand that we are a minority here, and we want to be part and parcel of this system, and we want to maximize our influence into the party, and that would mean engaging. And then as a party, for those who are not in the party, as a Muslim community, millions are not, they need to look at the package. They need to look at the package with the Conservative Party is offering. What is the package the Labour is offering? What is the other parties offering? And then, based on the package, you make a judgment, not a single issue.
So you don't agree with these kind of calls? I mean, what do you say to somebody
I'm
that tells
still
you?
here as a member, working actively and standing for the Labour Party. I clearly don't agree with it.
But how do you convince the other side to see what you see?
Well, by talking. And this is why I've always said to the party as well, that despite these difficulties, despite hostility being shown by some, out there, we must carry on talking. Talking is the secret, actually, to reaching closer to one another and to understand one another. And that requires listening mode. And that also means for both sides. We must listen to each other, and that's where you get to a healthy place.
With everything that we've spoken about the split that's happening in the Muslim community in these elections, do you think this could be the start of maybe Muslims finding a new political home later on, like a new political party, for example?
My answer would be no. Number one, despite all these difficulties that we've been discussing, the truth is, majority of the Muslims are still voting for Labour. If you analyze the whole results you have seen, and we had the local results, we had the police commission.
But it's a lesser percentage.
Yes, I would accept that. Yeah, there is a drop.
Yes.
And there's a variation in what the drop is, and it may change from place to place as well. So ultimately, the key point I would say is the majority are still with the Labour Party. And my second point is finding a home. Well, where is this home? Conservative, I have a serious issues of their whole record, how they've been treating the Muslim community, and they are the major force. The interesting point would be is that such is the collapse of the Conservative Party that a new force emerges. And the worry I would have is that's more likely to be further far right than what we have now of the Conservative. And that's not going to be our home. It's not hardly a place which you will find attractive. And then you go to the other side, whether some of these small parties, whether it's a Lib Dem or Green, again, I think they're so small that by us joining them, as I already said, 0 plus 0 equals still 0. So it doesn't change the equation for me. And then the third option which we talk about is whether Muslims themselves, again, I would say that would be a disaster, because the way we are spread, there'll be very little areas where we will see the success. And therefore, again, it will be a useless thing to do. It certainly would harm our interest. And every previous experiment that was made ended up in disaster. So my worry really is, and this was why I felt so angry of the current Vote Muslim operation, the way they're running it, that they're actually undermining the interest of the Muslim community. So I'm not talking about Labour Party, I'm talking about the Muslim community. It is not in their interest what they're doing.
One of the things that's at the heart of the problem anyway is that this perception that Muslim voters are going to vote for us anyway, you know, whether there's anger or there's not, you know, they're always going to come to us.
Yeah.
And that builds some sort of them taking the vote for granted.
And there's two sides to this coin, isn't it? So one is the Muslim community's perspective, and the other is the party's perspective. I think no political party should ever be in this position where they feel they can take the vote of any individual or any group or any community for granted. That is not acceptable, and that should not happen. The other side is for the community, then to make the parties realize that you can't do this, you damage your interest. And that brings me to the key sort of formula. So anything the Muslim community wants to do, the test they have to apply must be that will this action lead to Muslim community being stronger or weaker? And if the conclusion of that is weaker, don't do it, because that is not the interest of the Muslim community. The interest of the Muslim community lies in the fact that we strengthen ourselves. The upper hand is better than the lower hand. So no way you should do anything which weakens the Muslim community.
If people come up to you and say, you know, we don't like the way the party has treated certain figures, right? Like Abbott, Diane Abbott, and Faiza, Shaheen, and others, and they, you know, the way the media has framed this is that this is a purge of the left, a purge of the Corbyn era left or Corbyn era politicians. What do you make of this?
I mean, on a personal level?
Yeah, on a personal level, yeah.
I find it a little bit upsetting, because I do believe, as a party, we are a broad church, and I feel uncomfortable when we find that certain people who have been there, in particularly Diane Abbott, you know, who is an icon, someone who's given her life to the Labour Party, who has a lot of experience, and a lot of black people, the BME people, look up to her. And for her to be treated like that, probably what I find difficult is the time it took us, well, not me personally, but those who are investigating, to come to a conclusion.
So you find it upsetting on a personal level?
I think so, yes.
How would you have liked to see the party react?
Look, I believe in the fair processes. Yeah, I think that's fundamental. That's who we are as a party as well. So that fairness must be done and must be seen to be done. Fundamental to our idea and justice as well. And I think that delayed justice is also not acceptable idea. So I would have liked to see Diane's issue have been resolved a bit quicker. But look, at the end of the day, then I can say, hey, it got to the right place. Yeah, she's there. She was allowed.
And anything on what happened to Faiza Shaheen?
Again, I felt really sad for her. I thought it seemed to me, first of all, I don't know enough, so I want to be careful what I say. But looking at it from the distance, you know, someone who is a young Muslim woman who's just given a birth as well, who has been working for many years, and now she was so close to knocking out Ian Duncan Smith, yeah, who's again a party leader of the Conservative Party, a senior person, and then being sort of pulled out. What I'm not comfortable about it also is what you hear from the media, but again, I'm not privy to the full facts. From the media's perspective, some things which may have been for many, many years old. It's a bit severe, I thought.
Bit severe.
Yeah, I've thought. But I just want to say that I actually don't have the full facts. But from where I'm standing, it looks like that. And I think there are many who feels like that. I'm sad that she's left. I'm sad that she's spending independently. And I hope we get that seat, because I think it's good to get out a Tory, always.
A question I'd like to ask is, when your constituents, as you're knocking around and, giving out posters and stuff, when they speak to you about Gaza, if they speak to you about Gaza, what is the first thing or number one thing that they tell you?
I think what surprised me is the depth. And many people just think it's the Muslims. The truth is, the feeling is much deeper and wider. I think any individual, any human being, for the first time, we've been able to instantly watch on videos and TVs, on so many different social platforms, what is happening there. I think it's hit hard many people. The horrors of any war and the horrors of this modern war machine that we have built. And then I think what hits them also is they start sort of looking into it a little bit more and then realize the scale of devastation, not only of the human loss of life, but the whole everything is sort of almost carpet bombarded there, yeah, flattened. And then when you look into it more, and then you realize that actually this has been going on for 76 plus years. And then you say, whoa, why? Yeah. As a human, you see, you just want to see a peaceful, loving, caring, prosperity. That's wherever you are, whoever you are. And then you learn that there are millions of refugees clutching on to their old keys with the hope that still can go back to their country. And then you find that they're not being allowed. And then others who have no connection, just because of particular faith, they are then allowed to be back. You can feel the injustice idea. When God is being treated as a state's agent, people find it difficult.
We've seen videos of other Labour candidates being shouted at or being labeled a certain way because of, the party's Gaza stance, basically. Has that happened to you?
Now and then, but I think, broadly speaking, it's not been that bad for me. I'm not sure why, but I wouldn't say that's not happened to me. There's been. I remember an incident in Rochdale. I was campaigning at a by-election and knocked at this door, and this young man opened the door, and it was very firm, very clear. He did not want to support. And then his brother came from the back, and from his body language you could tell that he's more aggressive. And I saw that, so I said, "Assalamu alaikum." And he ignored and shouted at me and says, "Get out of my garden." So I stood the ground.
And you knew it because you were a Labour member?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I stood the ground. I looked back straight into his eyes and I said, "I've just said Assalamu alaikum to you. I expect a reply." When I pushed that, I just said Assalamu alaikum to you. He looked at me and said, "Wa alaikum salam, now get out of my garden." You could see then the intensity. They were feeling it. They didn't even know who I was. They didn't know that what I'd done. They didn't know I'm the guy, who has spoken 33 times on this course, more than they've done. But for them, no.
But it's also a sheer reflection of the anger, isn't it?
Yes, yes, that's what I'm saying. So that was experience that I had. Then recently I saw my good friend Tan, how he was hassled outside the mosque. And I felt really bad because I know Tan. I know his commitment. I know how he works on issue of Gaza and stuff. So for that behavior, to me, is not acceptable. We all feel it. It's not that we don't feel it. We do. And so you can see why people have strong feelings on this. But what we need to do is, work. And like I said, for me, you got to keep talking. And often when you do talk, then you realize that the difference isn't that great. Most of the time, both sides want the same thing.
You've become a backbencher for the first time in your political career, right, since you've become an MP.
Yeah.
How do you think this will shape your role within the party?
I think being a backbencher, it's allowed me to experience being a backbencher. It's allowed me to understand some of the freedom that you have as a backbencher. I didn't know this because within 3 weeks I was on the front bench. So getting this experience, I think, has helped me to understand being an MP and the different roles that you can play. And I respect being a backbencher as well. The truth is, I resigned, and the truth is, I may be on the front bench. The truth is, I may not be. But for me, first, I don't have any regrets what I did. I think I did the right thing. And secondly, my view on life is, I'm not in here for a position. I'm here to do my best and to serve. And whatever position Allah wills, I'm quite content. I will give my 100%. So where I am.
And on that note, Afzal Khan, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you.
You as well. Thank you so much.